Hello and welcome back to the Analytixx Sports Pod. I'm your host, Emil Asaf, here with Brendan O'Donnell, Ethan Love, Spencer Grant, and this is hosted by SportsCaster Media, the best platform for young and rising sportscasters like us. We have a lot to talk about. It is finally NBA playoff season after a wild NBA season. We saw Bam Adebayo drop 83. Luka put up numbers out of this world in his first Lakers season. Wembanyama be the man over in San Antonio, lead them to 60 wins, among all the crazy things across the NBA. But now we have to see what is coming up because NBA playoffs, that's when everybody in the world tunes in to the action. It's all about basketball. And I have to ask you guys, what do we think about the initial matchups, but also who is going to take home that Larry O'Brien trophy? Guys, let's get it rolling right into the NBA.
I'll say this is the most excited I've been for playoffs in a while. Both the East and the West, all 10 teams have a winning record except for the Warriors. But they probably would have if it weren't for injuries to Steph and to Jimmy Butler. So there's 19 teams deep with winning records. Tanking or not, whether these records are kind of inflated from tanking, that's impressive that we have this many solid rosters in the NBA. And
Yeah.
I'm excited. I think the first round of playoffs in the West, I think is going to be less exciting, but that second round is where it's going to really pick up. But in the East, I think every matchup is really interesting, especially with how it's played out with Cade getting an injury so recently. The Pistons being the 1 seed going against some really strong competition that could be an 8 seed and a really hot Hornets team if they make it through. The Heat, who always knows how to turn it up in the playoffs. It could be any of these teams. I think the one I am most interested in, though, to start is the Knicks versus the Hawks. The Hawks are 20-6 since the All-Star break. And they have Dyson Daniels, last year's most improved player. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is averaging 25 points per game since that break. And ever since they got rid of Trae Young, they just feel like a more complete team. They actually lead the lead in assists as well. I'm picking the Hawks to upset the Knicks in that series. I think that one goes 7. And as clutch as Jalen Brunson can be, I don't think you can always win those game 7s, those clutch moments. There's got to be a time where you finally miss that shot. I think the Hawks are going to upset the Knicks in that first round.
Yeah, that's a New York Knicks team too that came into the season with hype to potentially get the 1 seed. Obviously, right now, only above them is the Pistons. Came out of nowhere to be a 60-win team. And then the Boston Celtics, well, a lot of people said, hey, Tatum might not even play the entire year. It's their reset year after getting rid of Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. I actually think, unlike you said, I think the West is where it's going to be really, really entertaining. This Rockets 4 seed that's facing the Lakers at the 5 seed, they have to start out hot because Luka and Austin Reeves, who have been injured, are targeting a game 3 return. If they don't get out to that 2-0 lead, that could be a very interesting series with KD and LeBron going against each other. But the one I'm really looking at is the Nuggets against the Timberwolves, a 3-6 matchup where in their last 28 games between the two, including the playoffs, they are 14-14. Not only that, Nikola Jokic, MVP candidate this year, he's averaging 35, 15, and 11 against Minnesota this season. This is going to be the typical battle of the Titans. You have Rudy Gobert, who's a multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year, trying to guard Nikola Jokic to do his best.
He's
You
always
have
struggling in that
well, that's the
matchup.
thing, and that's the thing. It's a hard matchup, but what are these guys gonna do to limit Jokic while at the same time, Jamal Murray, first time All Star this year, as hard as that is to believe, how are they going to balance that duo? And one note about the Nuggets. This is a team that started 20-6 for the season. Then they had a stretch where they are right under 500 because of so many injuries. And then they finished the season 19-2, including a 12-game win streak once Jokic comes back. That's going to be my bold prediction for right now. Whoever wins that series is going to go on to beat the Spurs in the following round, a 60-win team that has all the hype and be in the Western Conference Finals. Guys, what do we think?
Emil, I'm glad that you brought up the Spurs because I'm looking at the Spurs and I'm looking at the Pistons, both on opposite sides of the bracket, obviously. But
Mhm.
these are very high seeds that they haven't really been here before. They have not been in the situation with their new core group of players, Cade for the Pistons, and then you got Wemby, obviously, who's answered every single question that everyone's
Yeah.
had about him since he entered the league. But again, these young teams, can be susceptible. I'm looking at both of their series, whoever they end up playing, to see how they handle that being big, probably favored in those series. I want to see how they answer that before they go into the next round against probably some tougher competition. I would expect both of those teams to win their round one games, but again, you got to see how dominant that they can be when they're favored.
Yeah, and
I'm
that's
glad
something we saw out of. Sorry about that.
you're
That's
good.
something we saw out of OKC whenever they were the
Yeah.
one seed a few years ago, and they were the youngest one seed ever. They lost the series to the Mavericks because it was such a young team that didn't have playoff
Mhm.
experience. I'm sure Spencer, that's where you were going with
Yeah.
that. So I'll let you take it away.
No, I was just going to say, Ethan, I'm glad you brought that up. Emil, you hit the nail right on the head there. I mean, as good as the Spurs have been, and just beyond Wemby, we know how much of an alien that dude has become. And we knew it was only a matter of time before this young Spurs team really took off. Credit to their manager for putting the right kind of talent around them. And they still had to take off this season and really develop into players that could have put them in this position. But again, man, we saw the Thunder that looked like the unstoppable juggernaut they look like now a couple years
Yeah,
ago before they ran into a Dallas team where even though Luka was still, I think, only 24 years old, he had experience taking down one seeds in the playoffs. We know what Kyrie's all about. And then everything else was just that little team put together at the trade deadline that just seemed like they were more ready to win, at least at that time. But I also want to piggyback a little bit off of what you said, Emil. I'm telling you, man, the Denver Nuggets, you cannot count them out of any playoffs that they've been in. We know this matchup against the Timberwolves are going to be incredible. You look at the 2 years they've had since winning that championship in 2023. They were pushed to the brink and lost in 7 to a Timberwolves team that was ultimately designed to beat them. And as
yeah,
much as I loved the Mavericks run at that point, I don't know if that Mavericks team is beating Denver. The Mavericks were a much tougher matchup for what Minnesota threw out at them at that time. So who knows? If Denver grits out that series, there's no telling what would have happened, but I don't like that Mavericks team odds trying to take down Jokic. Similarly, last year, you look at the run that the Thunder went on. Yes, Indiana really scared them in the finals and really looked like they were going to be that team of destiny before Halliburton got hurt. But the Nuggets also pushed them to 7 games and in many ways made them look as mortal as they had looked all season up to that point. Denver just does that in the postseason. It's like no matter who they're playing, they seem to raise or lower their level of play to whatever competition that they're playing. And beyond Jokic, you got Jamal Murray, who's finally staying healthy. You've got a guy like Aaron Gordon, who's one of the best defenders in the league when
yeah,
healthy. And when his 3-pointer's going, he's arguably one of the best two-way weapons in the postseason across the entire NBA. So barring injuries, you got guys like Christian Braun, even Tim Hardaway Jr. Freaking Tim Hardaway Jr., the spark plug himself, coming off the
yeah.
bench, raining threes this season. If the Nuggets can get past the Timberwolves this postseason, I don't know if anybody's going to stand in their way. But I feel like I will say it'll be a postseason where every series they're in is probably going to go 6 or 7 games because that's
That
just the
That's
type of
that's
team that
exactly what I
Denver
was going to
is.
say
But
next.
they're
I was
built to
going to say,
withstand
yeah,
that long grinding level of competition. But
right, 100%.
Jokic's prime isn't getting any shorter. So Denver knows
going
if
off
it's
your
going
That's
to make
true.
it
point of
happen, it's now or never.
your point where they can play up or down to any of these levels. Let's just play like a hypothetical. Nuggets T-Wolves, I feel like I could see that going 7. Then they play the Spurs. I could see Nuggets Spurs going 7. And then they play the
Yeah,
Thunder. I could see that going 7. And that's just how you feel about the Nuggets, where
Mhm.
I don't think they're going to win any of their playoff matchups in 5. They're not going to have a
No.
gentleman's sweep. Or they have a really tough push all the way to the finals where they could face a really good Celtics team or Pistons team or some other underdog from the East coming through again. Man, I think y'all are sleeping on the Spurs. That is my championship team right there.
okay.
I am all in on the Spurs, even though they're as young as they are and as inexperienced as they are. This team is deep. They almost
Mhm.
had 8 players average 10 or more points. If Harrison Barnes scored 5 more points on Sunday against the Nuggets, he would have been
That
at
would have
10.
happened.
Well, they would
Mhm.
have had it. That would have been an NBA record. No team's ever done that before. But instead, they have 7 players with 10 points per game. This team is deep. They are young and athletic. The reason why they can keep up with the Thunder is the Thunder are equally young and athletic. Other teams just can't. This is why the Spurs end up in a lot of blowouts, even with good teams, and we're able to compete with the Thunder and beat them 4-1. They're young, they're athletic. For teams like the Nuggets, anytime Jokic left the floor, the plus or minus was insane in the Spurs'
Yeah.
favor. Even though the Nuggets ended up winning the most recent 2 games against them, one with Wemby, one without. The one with Wemby, the Spurs got up 10 fast as soon as Jokic left in the fourth quarter. Jokic came back in, and that's where the whole Wemby might struggle with Jokic kind of narrative came out. And Jokic is still the best player in the world, and why isn't he in the MVP conversation? Was because of that match. It did end up dominating Wemby enough into overtime and beating them in that game. But that's how I think all the games would go. Anytime Jokic is on the floor, it's an even battle. Jokic leaves the game. That Spurs team is just deeper and better than the Nuggets, and that's why I think the Spurs can easily go to the Western Conference Finals again. And they've shown that they can beat the Thunder. So then it just comes to whoever they face up against in the East. And can they all live up to the levels that they had in the regular season in the because of how young and inexperienced they are?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you're rolling with the Spurs to be your total champion.
Champion.
Spencer and I are rolling with the Nuggets to be our champion. Is that correct? Ethan, fill us in on the last one before we move on to this next topic.
I don't want to sound like I'm stealing an idea here, but I totally agree with Brendan. I think that I mentioned like having both of the young teams prove themselves. I think the Pistons are going to be the one to fade out. The Spurs have proved it against top talent. Brendan mentioned how deep they were. And I just look at the fact that everyone sees Oklahoma City from the outside as this juggernaut, and the Spurs have beat them 4-1 this season.
Yeah, they're 4-1 against them. Yeah. And, you guys bring up a great point, which actually takes us to our next topic. The fact that this team is so deep, it just shows because Wembanyama only averaged 29 minutes per game this season. He was the first guy in NBA history to average 25 points per game and at least 10 rebounds per game under 30 minutes. Absolutely insane, which brings the question, does the depth of this team and how well they play, even when Wembanyama is not involved or not on the floor, does that hurt his MVP case a little bit? Which right now it's between 3 absolute superstars, future Hall of Famers. Nikola Jokic, we talked about him, first guy in NBA history to lead the league in rebounds and assists per game in the same season. SGA having one of the most efficient guard seasons ever, and Wemby. Who is the guy that should take it in you guys' opinion?
I want to keep it really short, guys. I think it's between Jokic, and I think it's between SGA. I'm just going to give you guys some season high stats because I think where you peak as an MVP is very important. Jokic, 56 points is his high this season. SGA's is 55. Very close there, but Jokic gets the nod. Rebounds, Jokic 21, SGA 10. Big difference there, but Jokic is a big guy. Jokic 19 assists, SGA 15. Jokic 5 steals, SGA 4, and I'll give him this one because it's his bread and butter. But SGA does have more free throws than Jokic. As far as the team goes, SGA has his high this season is 26, and Jokic is 24. But I think when you look at it that way, and also I think if you take SGA off of Oklahoma City, they're still a playoff team and they're still good. We talked about it. When you take Jokic out of the equation for Denver, they become so bad.
Hey, real quick, I'm going to counter that point you just made about SGA because as much as I don't like his play style, this guy is the back-to-back MVP in my opinion. You say as soon as you take SGA away from this team, they would still be a playoff team. But they did take away SGA with the oblique injury for a little bit, and they went 56-12 with him, lost a couple of games, and only had 8 wins without him. And here's the other part. This season, the Thunder were the number 1 seed in the West throughout the entirety of the year, despite J-Dub only playing 33 games after being an All-Star and being All-NBA last year. Despite Lou Dort shooting 33% from 3, going down from 42 last year. And SGA, yes, he shoots free throws, but he just put together the highest scoring season for a guard while shooting it more than 55 from the field. It's numbers comparable to Michael Jordan. When you look at the true shooting numbers, which consider the difficulty of shot, you could say it's the highest true shooting season for a guard since 2016, Steph Curry, who was the unanimous MVP. Yes, I understand the play style hurts your take on SGA. And I understand Jokic is putting up these crazy numbers. But when it comes to efficiency and backpacking a team, nobody did it like SGA this year. As much as I actually don't even like SGA, it's the flat out truth.
SGA was definitely the most consistent player start to end, and it was proven with the record that he broke Wilt's record of most 20 plus points per game in a row. I think it has to go to Shea. I want to give every argument against it. Jokic led the league in and rebounds and assists. First time anybody's ever done that. Wemby, I think, the best two-way player in the NBA. And if it was who do I want in my team most, I'd pick Wemby. But that's not the award. It does come down to some NBA narratives. And being the best player on the best team is really important with NBA MVPs. And it's been that way since I was born. And Shea was consistent start to end of the season. His numbers never really dipped. When he was off the team for a little bit with injury, they did go 8-4. But that's still a dip compared to how great they are with him on the floor. Their win rate goes from, what is that? That's like 66%, but they're usually like an 80%.
Yeah, they're in the 80s. Yeah.
When he's playing. And that's still a massive jump. Any team would rather have a player join their team and they get a 15% win share off of that. And so I think it goes to Shea in the end. I think it just has to go to the guy who started the season and ended the season with no dips throughout. Team was consistent throughout. And like you said, those injuries to the other players around him on his team and him still being able to put up the same numbers he always does. I have a lot of respect to him in that sense. I would much rather have Jokic or Wemby on my team, but Shea would get the MVP.
Yeah, and to give credit to Wemby, too, he's going to be the unanimous deep boy. I mean, this guy's insane. Over 3 blocks per game, the record that he broke. But the only race that really is this tight is the MVP race. So, Spencer, are you going to side with my man Ethan right here, or are you siding with the other boys?
I'm absolutely siding with Ethan out of the candidates that realistically have a chance of winning the MVP. I mean, I think, and this is not just because I'm a certified hater of the Oklahoma City Thunder. What Shea is doing is very MVP worthy, but there is not a single scenario where you can paint for me where you take SGA off that team and that Thunder team doesn't at least make it to like the 8th seed or something. So that's enough there. Wemby, he's Wemby. I don't hate that if he's going to win the MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. That goes without question. You take Jokic out of Denver. Denver is going to plummet. It's just, we know what that team looks like with and without him. He's the engine that makes the mountain move, so to speak. But you look at the Los Angeles Lakers, the NBA, the media, ESPN, whoever it is, they all have a problem with my Slovenian king, Luka Doncic, because I'm not even going to really pull up that many stats from him because we saw this in Dallas in 2024 when he went 34, 9, and 10 on the season. He's at 34, 8, and 8 right now, okay? And all of a sudden, on this season in particular, the Lakers are 43 and 21 with him, 10 and 8 without him. Yes, Austin Reeves is fantastic. Yes, LeBron James is continuing to defy the laws of time. But you take Luka out of that team, and all of a sudden they look so much more discombobulated as a unit. They don't move well. They resort to kind of just hero ball, like we saw them do against the Thunder, even with Luka. But beyond that, it's this season in particular. What's the narrative around Luka? It's that he isn't a great defender. Matter of fact, he's a cone on defense. Well, if you look at every defensive metric this season, at worst, he's been an average defender, and he's putting up better offensive numbers than everybody that's currently in the MVP race. What was the issue in 2024 with the Mavericks? Oh, they're only the 5th seed. Well, before he got hurt, the Lakers were about to lock up the 3 seed, and yet they moved the goalpost again. So despite missing the race for the MVP by 1 game because of an untimely injury and missing 2 games for the birth of his child back in January, he's going to miss out on all NBA odds. He's going to miss out on the MVP. What this dude has gotten all of NBA fandom so desensitized to year after year after year needs to be talked about and commemorated in some way. And it sucks that yet another year is going to go by where nothing is going to come from it. But, you know, quickest way to shut people up in that regard is win a finals MVP. Odds have never been stacked more against him, but I'm telling you, man, at some point, they're going to have to give him some credit if he's just doing this season after season. But that's just my 2 cents about that man.
And it really does suck because Luka has been a baller and has been putting up these crazy numbers for years and years now. But you bring up actually controversial point that's been talked about throughout the season, and that's the 65 game rule where Luca doesn't meet it despite playing more minutes than Wemby, who does meet it. And another guy like Bruce Brown has been the talk right now because he played 82 games, but he doesn't meet it because he didn't get 20 minutes per game. But that's a whole other topic. But we're gonna stick with the controversial topics. And right now, the biggest one is tanking in the NBA. Not only just tanking, but hand in hand going with the topic of NBA expansion, which we can hit real quick. Because how are you going to add more teams if there's already 10 or 12 that aren't even trying to be competitive? So, guys, how do you address this issue? And is it the right move to also consider expansion for the NBA? Wow, I left you guys shocked with that one.
Yeah, no, I kind of want to touch on the idea of expansion first because
Yeah,
in my
go for it.
mind, there are a couple teams in the Western Conference that I don't think should be there, and I think the two that aligns directly with I think the two cities that have the largest cases for adding NBA teams. You've got Seattle and you've got Las
Yeah,
Vegas. Okay,
yep.
Seattle. Since losing the Supersonics in 2009, you have a sports market that has teams in every other major sports league across America. And I forget why the Sonics initially moved to Oklahoma City of all places, but it's not like the fans of Seattle wanted to lose their NBA team. So it almost
Mm-mm.
feels like the right thing to do to give them their team back, at least
Yeah.
so that they can add that back to their city. Then you look at
And
Las Vegas.
OKC already said too that they're willing to give up the threads and willing to give up the branding to bring the Sonics back too. Just as
So
a
that
side
they
note,
so
but
that
go ahead.
the Sonics
So they get
history
their
can be
Yeah.
team
made in
history.
So the
Seattle.
Thunder
Yeah.
stay, and
Yeah.
then the Sonics can be added as well.
That's actually really cool. I didn't know that, but that would be
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
problem solved. That would be blast from the past that I
Right.
think
Fantastic.
real fans would appreciate. Yes. And then you got Las Vegas, which with the current state of Adam Silver's NBA product, it just makes sense to bring a team to
Hmm.
Vegas. I think they're like the 40th, like ranked 40th in TV market, but top 10 in sports market because who doesn't love, laying a little parlay down on their favorite sports team? And Vegas certainly
Yeah.
has the fandom and infrastructure to add another team to their market. So, where does this leave the NBA as a whole, going from 30 to 32? You got two more teams in the West, so you would inevitably have to move two Western teams to the East. And to that, I say, Memphis, New Orleans, it's been real. Get over there.
You're
Yeah.
adding the bad teams, though.
You could
I
do
feel like
Minnesota
you should
too.
move the
That's
Timberwolves.
another.
Yeah,
No.
Yeah.
exactly.
Minnesota, Oklahoma City, and Dallas are like dead center. Even
Yeah, but
Dallas is
all the
pushing
way
it
up
a little bit.
north.
Yeah,
But being on the north
they're like a
side's a little bit
line.
better because then they can play with those Midwest teams. And a
Yeah,
lot of
that's
those other
true.
teams are northeastern teams. It's still not that far from New York and stuff compared to
Mhm.
Dallas and Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
I'm all for the expansion teams. I'll kind of touch more on the tanking of everything. It's
Mhm.
just at its worst, it is a bad product, and that's why NBA playoffs are so big because it feels like things matter. Everybody's playing their toughest. The regular season for the NBA has kind of felt dead for a while. I feel like a lot of people jump back into basketball around football ending,
Playoff
around the
time.
All-Star break.
Yeah.
But by then, the tanking teams are already tanking. There's 20 teams in the league, or 15 teams in the league that you just know aren't going anywhere. You're not going to watch any of those games. Not even if they play against some of your favorite teams are you going to watch those games because they're going to get blown out by 20 or 30. That's just bad product. It sucks if you want to buy tickets to those games or if you bought tickets before they were tanking and now they're choosing to tank. It's just awful for the game. And until you get to the playoffs, I don't really feel like I'm expecting good basketball until like the first and second round of the playoffs because of all the
Yeah,
tanking.
that's fair. Yeah, here's the argument that I have against the anti-tanking laws and really, there's no really correct way to address it. There's rumors about the worst four teams in the NBA having actually worse odds to land number one pick. I think that would be a huge mistake because you look at the 360 win teams this season, the Spurs, the Thunder, and the Pistons, they all were absolutely awful, landed a top pick, and ended up getting their superstar that way, right? A lot of these teams are building through the draft. I think addressing tanking by uh, really punishing teams that want to get better through the draft would be a mistake, but I'm all for expansion. Ethan, we'll let you finish it
Yeah.
up for us.
Yeah, I think both of these issues go hand in hand. And I think when you're the NBA or a league that's trying to do a change like this, you have to look at a league, you have to be self aware, and you have to look at a league that does things better than you. And so look at the NFL. I wish for the NBA, first of all, that divisions mattered more. In the NFL, if you win your division, then you're guaranteed a playoff spot. For example, let's just say they add the two teams, get to 32, and then you have divisions of 4 separated by East, West, whatever you want to do as far as the league goes. But let's just say for the purpose of this, you have the Spurs, the Rockets, the Mavericks, and the Thunder in a division. And let's say, for example, they're all bad one year, but one of them's got to make the playoffs. So that's going to incentivize tanking right there, because you're like, well, everyone's kind of bad. Well, we can go ahead and we can try to make the playoffs here. And plus, I think it would really bring together rivalries, and games would matter more if you were playing, for example, the Mavericks. If they played the Spurs a ton, that would make that rivalry a little bit more intense. And it just kind of how it is in the NFL. Like, you have the Cowboys, the Eagles, and all these rivalries, Bears, Packers, and I think that's where you start to build up that type of loyal fandom like that. And then as far as the tanking goes, I just don't think that you should do anything. You need to just go back to worst team gets the first pick. Just do it. I don't understand wanting to mess with these teams being bad. If I'm a fan of an NFL team and my team is really, really bad, like they are just stinking it up, it at least gives me something to root for. I'm going to root for the tank if I'm a fan.
There's hope for the next year too.
Yeah, I want to be excited about the possibility of getting that number 1 pick. But if it's not in my hands at all and it's up to a lottery system, and you have things happen like the Mavericks getting Cooper Flag, etc., then that makes people question the integrity of your league, which is something I don't want. If you just have it be cut and dry like this, yes, the basketball is going to get bad, but the fans are going to root for them to get the number 1 pick. So I just don't understand why you wouldn't just get rid of the lottery altogether. I hate that MLB did a lottery starting a couple years ago. Just get rid of it, cut and dry. Worst team gets the first pick. I don't understand why we had to reinvent the wheel with that. I don't.
Ethan, I would say, that's one of the hot takes here with the NBA concerning the lottery, because the Dallas Mavericks fans here wouldn't even be enjoying Cooper Flag if it wasn't for that lottery that a lot of people end up liking. But that's just the nature of this league, right? With the playoffs coming up, a lot of different predictions about who's going to win. With awards, who ends up taking them home versus who doesn't. And then all these other issues surrounding the tanking, the expansion, among other things. But now all we can do is sit back, watch the playoffs, watch how this thing unfolds. This has been the Analytixx Sports Pod, hosted by me, Emil Asaf, here with Brennan O'Donnell, Ethan Love, Spencer Grant, and shout out to SportsCaster, the best platform for young and uprising sportscasters like us. Thank you guys for watching so much, and we'll see you on the next one.